How many times a day do you empty your bladder? Is it 5? 10? Maybe you have no idea at all. If you're suffering from overactive bladder, you know all about bladder urgency and emptying your bladder frequently. Unfortunately, emptying your bladder too often will actually make bladder urgency worse, and it also increases the likelihood of bladder leakage too. Hi, I'm Michelle, and today I'm guiding you through home treatment for bladder urgency. You may remember I recently showed you how to start a bladder diary, and I started my own diary too. Today I'm going to show you my own bladder diary results, which show I have some work to do. I'll also show you what normal bladder emptying looks like, and then we'll go through 3 key training steps for you to start using today. So what is normal bladder control? Well, normal bladder control for healthy individuals looks like this. Emptying 300 to 400 mils every time you empty. So that's about 1 1/4 to 1 3/4 cups. It's about this much in your bladder. So it's actually quite a lot, isn't it? It's also having the ability to hold on for 2-hour intervals or longer every time you empty. And really, you should be emptying your bladder 5 to 6 times a day and once at night. If you're filled in your bladder diary, how does your daily diary and the results compare to those figures? Are you emptying your bladder more than 5 to 6 times a day? Is the amount you're emptying less than 1 1/4 cups? Let me know in the comments below. Emptying your bladder too often with small amounts is a big problem, and here's why. If we take this as the bladder, and imagine this is your healthy bladder, and it's a muscular organ here, and it squeezes down, as I said before. It's constantly filling during the course of the day when urine is entering in the bladder, and you have little receptors in the walls of the bladder, and these are like little measuring sensors, and what they do is they measure how much stretch is on the walls of the bladder. So as urine enters the bladder stretches out and the little receptors become activated. Now when you get to a certain level of stretch, the sensors measure that stretch and the bladder empties. They trigger the bladder to empty. Okay, which is great. But then if you start emptying your bladder when you've got a smaller amount in it, like this, what happens is the little sensors become accustomed to emptying at this smaller amount rather than the larger amount. So they actually then start to trigger off the bladder squeezing down with this small amount rather than the large amount. So what happens is you progressively train a smaller and smaller bladder volume, and the sensors start triggering off at those smaller amounts. So what we need to do is get the bladder back to this size and train the sensors to measure at the larger volume than the smaller volume. So how do we do this? Well, there's going to be a number of strategies we use to actually get back to this size bladder. So in other words, you end up with a bladder capacity from large size, 350, 450 mils, or 1 3/4 cups, down to a really small volume. So we're really trying to retrain back to this from this small volume. So I think you can see how prompting your kids to empty their bladder before going out or getting into the car isn't helpful for their long-term bladder control. Now here's how you can train your bladder to store more urine to help you get back from this to this. First of all, make sure you check with your doctor before starting this bladder training. And it's really important that you make sure that you haven't got any health problems, underlying health problems, causing your bladder symptoms. On the flip side of this, if your bladder volumes are really large, or if you have trouble emptying your bladder, it's also important to avoid this type of bladder retraining. Now, here are the 3 main steps to start with. The first step is to hold off emptying your bladder, to allow it to fill more when your urge isn't appropriate to empty. For example, if it's been less than 2 hours since you last emptied your bladder. Try to hold off emptying your bladder for as long as you comfortably manage to do so. Everyone's different. Some of us will be able to hold on for 2 to 5 seconds, others it'll be 2 to 5 minutes. Do what feels comfortable for you. The main thing is to gradually increase the length of time to delay your emptying so your bladder starts to feel more comfortable when it's a little fuller. A common mistake I see when starting out is trying to hold off emptying for too long. So doing this really upsets the bladder and actually makes your urgency worse. Bladder control training is gradual. Try to be patient and give your body time to adjust. Now try to avoid emptying your bladder just in case. And this is along the lines of step 1. If you don't need to empty your bladder, then try not to empty it just in case. Typical examples of emptying your bladder just in case are going to the loo before you get into the shower, or also before going out. Start with small challenges at home and where it feels safe to avoid emptying, and ask yourself, do you really need to empty your bladder before you do so? And finally, try to drink more water. While this seems counterintuitive, many people don't drink enough water, and they do this to try to reduce how much urgency they're experiencing, but this actually makes urgency worse. Now, most of us know that healthy adults should drink about 6 to 8 glasses of fluids daily. But how many of us actually do this? If you're not drinking enough caffeine-free fluid, gradually start to try and drink more during the course of the day rather than all at once. And try to drink water rather than caffeine. Water's the best fluid to drink. I'm a little surprised to learn from my own diary that some days I only drink a few cups of water. So today I've started filling up my drink bottle, and I'm going to start drinking from this, keeping it on my desk and in the car so that it motivates me and reminds me to drink more too. And finally, just in case you're wondering, here are my bladder diary results to share with you today. Well, my maximum void was actually 480 mils or 16 ounces, which is nearly 2 cups. That was at 5:30 in the morning, so I'm quite impressed with that. My average void though was less than a cup, so it's actually too low. My daily frequency was 10 voids, so way too high for me. I should be going to 5 to 6 times. And I woke up twice to empty my bladder at night, which was too often. So I'd like to get this down to less than 1 or less than 1 void. I should be able to improve upon my results by drinking more water throughout the day and gradually holding off how much I'm emptying, which you'll probably agree is easier said than done. So next time I'm going to show you what to do when you feel urgency and how to get rid of it fast without taking medication. So let me know if you have any questions from today's video. If you found this information helpful, I'd really appreciate you giving this video the thumbs up below. And I'll see you next time with our urge control strategies. Until then, bye for now.